Hello, hello, everyone, and welcome back. This is going to be the closing session of Dare to Be Great 5. It has been an excellent week, and I'm excited for this closing session. Our speaker today is going to be Rich Troshek, and he is going to be doing a session called Climbing the Ladder Career Development and Public Safety Communications. Take it away, my friend.
Thank you, Ricardo. Welcome, everybody. I'm so excited to be here to talk about career development and public safety communication. My name is Rich Troshak. I'm Director of 911 and Geospatial Service Outreach for the Virginia Department of Emergency Management. My career started in 1992 as a dispatcher in Bucks County, Pennsylvania. I went to Kansas City, Kansas to be the training coordinator and got promoted to PSAP manager. I was a director in Michigan, as well as managed the Department of Homeland Security Philadelphia Mega Center prior to moving to Virginia, where I was a PSAP director for 10 years before going to the state. First with the Office of OEMS and now finally with VDEM, where we have a 911 bureau that serves all 124 PSAPs in Virginia. So super excited to talk a little bit about that journey and some things that may help newer folks evolve in our career. So before I talk about my class and some ideas about how to develop your career in public safety, I want to just comment on Ricardo's movement and the whole concept behind Dare to Be Great. It's a great title, but it's so important in light of career development. We don't just wake up awesome. We don't wake up great. Becoming great takes time, effort, and risk. It takes a lot of hard work. And daring to be great is a willful manifestation of excellence. And I think that's so important to be mindful of as we move forward. So what I'd like first to do is talk a little bit about 6 strategies for success. And these strategies helped me in my career to move from a dispatcher into a director, and now in a position where I help PSAPs all throughout my state. So the first strategy for success is to invest. That's me. Probably around 1993 or 4, a couple years after I started as a dispatcher. Like many of you, didn't grow up wanting to be a 911 dispatcher necessarily, but it's a job that I got into and really liked. Like most of you that worked in a 911 center, it takes about a year till you really feel comfortable in your job with all the different types of calls that come in. So, after I spent that year at Bucks County, which was a very busy dispatch center. It's a suburb just north of Philadelphia. I had to make a decision. Is this just a job until I find something else I'm interesting? Or is this something I want to do for the rest of my life? And I really committed to it. And said, I want to do this. I want to get better at this. And, training back then was a lot different than today. Basic training for dispatch was very basic. We didn't have the internet as it is today with all the free resources and training that exists. So, the first steps I took was, how do I invest in myself? I don't want to go at the pace my agency takes me along. I want to go at a pace where I'm going to really commit to this and become the best public safety telecommunicator I can. So back then I started taking any free classes I could find. And most of them were like what we call back then a correspondence class. Like, you get the material and the test and you take it and you send it in and they score it and they give you a certificate. So I explored a lot of different areas to invest in myself. One thing I did as a dispatcher is I became an amateur radio operator. It wasn't so much to play with the radios, but it helped me understand how radios work better, which certainly helped me in my career as I moved up in public safety communication into the position of director. But I got to the point there wasn't any low-hanging fruit and I had to make a decision and pony up some money to actually go take a class. So it's about 1995. APCO had just come out with their CTO instructor class, and I was really excited to do this. And by that time, I realized I worked in an agency with over 100 employees. There was no way my work was going to send me to this, and I really wanted it. So I made a decision along with my family to take a week's vacation, sign up for the class, and go pay my own room and board and take this class for CTO instructor. And back then it cost about $1,500, which was pretty substantial. But I was really committed to that. And people at my work, now I didn't tell my, necessarily my managers I was doing this. I did it on my own, but some people I worked with knew about it and they thought I was pretty crazy for doing it. But, I realized that I wasn't going to get it if I just waited and have someone hand it to me. I had to go out and do it myself. So the next strategy is to be inspired. Now, I threw this picture up, and if you know what it is, throw in the chat what you think it is. I'll give you a hint. It is not a droid prototype for The Mandalorian season 4. But can we see somebody in the chat? Wow, the overhead. Exactly, the overhead projector. So back then, classes, we didn't have PowerPoint. We didn't have high school 1997. Thank you, Heather. We didn't have, we didn't have PowerPoint. We didn't have these big 50-inch screens. We didn't have projectors back then. And so, if you were fancy, you'd have what's called a transparency, and you lay it on there, and and it would project onto a screen. I was kind of a poor trainer, so as I did my own stuff, I had sheets of paper and put it on there, and it did a pretty good job. But what was so inspiring to me was when I went to take this APCO class, which I believe was up in Connecticut, is I got to spend some time with the instructor. And the instructor's name was Dave Bubb. And Dave Bubb at the time was an adjunct instructor for APCO. He would later go on to be the APCO Institute director. And it was my first exposure to like a professional 911 trainer. And I'll be honest with you, to me, he was a rock star. He had the command presence in the class, very smooth going through the materials and sharing information, had good stories. And to me, it was very inspiring to spend that time with him in class. In addition to that, Dave was very generous with his time, and we were all kind of stuck there for a week. So several times, we had lunch together, and a couple times we had dinner together. And I was a sponge at that point, and I was just sucking it all in. So we had 4 days where Dave taught on the overhead. And then on the 5th day, like my entire world changed, because I literally, what happened that day really directed the rest of my career. So Dave comes in and he pushes the overhead aside. He rolls up the cart with the TV and the VCR. He puts a little box on back of the TV. He hooks a laptop up to that box, and he teaches the last day session in slides on the TV screen. And my mouth was just on the floor, because that was just something so new and so exciting. And I came back from that after having spent, all that money, and had to convince my poor wife, hey, listen, I know we just spent this money, but I need to buy a laptop, which back then a real basic laptop is about $2,500. And I need this little converter box, and I need this program. And I was able to convince her to help support me in that. And so that's when I really started as a trainer in that medium, and really learning how to create slides and PowerPoints. And one of my first enjoyable memories after that was bringing that contraption into my work and presenting for some of my coworkers and some of my supervisors, and blew them away with it. So it's just interesting. I mean, you talk about being in the right place at the right time. Yes, there's that. But it's not just about seeking inspiring things. It's allowing yourself to be inspired. And that was transformational to me, and helped set me on a course for the rest of my career. And I really appreciate Dave for his time he spent with me. And I've talked to him since then, and he's certainly very humble about it. But to me, it meant a lot at the time. And so, that's another thing as you go forward, knowing the impact you have on others and how you can help them in the future. Next thing was, always dream big. So I started developing my skills, teaching classes at my agency, and I wanted to present at like a national APCO. That was a big thing for me. And back then, we really only had APCO and NINA. There's so many different conferences today. There's Denise Amber Lee. There's a Now One Wonder Woman. There is the Tenacious Telecommunicator. There's all kinds of different things, including Within the Trenches and all the stuff Ricardo does. But back then, it was pretty much APCO and NINA. And the first time I put in for a class, it got turned down, and I was really kind of a little disappointed about that. But again, that's a decision we make, because I could have just shut down. I could have said, hey, my stuff's good. They didn't realize it. I sat down and said, why didn't I do it? And I figured it out. I tried to put about 3 hours classes into one class. And back then they made you send the PowerPoints when you submitted a class. So I had to learn and grow up. That was a rookie mistake, and I was still a rookie. But eventually, this is a picture of me in 2001. I was presenting in Salt Lake City, Utah, at the National APCO conference, and had a total of 12 presentations at National APCO over the years. And that's been such an exciting thing for me. And again, by sticking to it, by trying to improve my craft, it's been something that really helps you. The other thing that's important is to make a plan. Things just don't happen. I can remember early in my career, when I was managing Kansas City, Kansas 911 Center, that I still really wanted to get into professional training and be a trainer. And so I had written out like a PowerPoint, and kind of a guide on where I wanted to direct myself over the next few years in terms of training, in terms of opportunities. And I focused on that, and I did follow those things. Now, at the end of the day, I really fell in love with PSAP management, and that was the rest of my, career, 20 years in PSAP management. But, the effort I put into the plan and to developing my skills as a presenter, all those things actually helped prepare me for that career as a PSAP manager. So even if you decide to make an adjustment, some of those things that you've worked on can still apply to that new idea, that new direction you want to go in. Another thing that's really important, and I'm going to talk about this later in the session, is going for gold. So when there's an opportunity, you don't want to be the person that decides 5 hours before the posting ends if you're going to put in for it and throw together something. No, you need to really look at, how do I prepare? What research do I do? How do I prepare my documentations? How do I customize my cover letter and resume and things like that to be able to get a maximum benefit from it? So, for me, when opportunities came up and I was able to move in different roles throughout the country, and it just was the path that I took in my career, going for gold and really committing to those opportunities and pulling out the stops and doing my best, that really helped me get positive results. And we're going to talk a little bit later how to accomplish that. And lastly is paying it back, and or be the Dave Bub. So I learned a lot, and I was a benefit of many mentors and coaches as I moved up in my career. And one of the most rewarding things is to be that mentor and coach and help other people and encourage them to speak at conferences, encourage them to give back to their profession and improve themselves, and sometimes encourage them to go to classes they pay for themselves, because they will pay back that with interest in their career. So those are some elements I think are really important. They were my 6 strategies for success in my career. So just really briefly, there's a lot of major trends in public safety communication. It's evolved over the years. We have more civilianized centers, which has created more jobs to aspire to within organizations. Consolidation, technology, and now AI. AI is a big factor. Corporate influences and doing more with less. These are all things that our positions have evolved in over the years. It's also too important to note that career paths aren't just the promotion. Obviously we only get the job title and the promotion, the extra pay, but sometimes there's opportunities to improve your skills, your knowledge, and be involved with different challenges and learn more from that prepare you to be a better leader, prepare you to be a better public safety communicator. So when you think about, if you're starting out, what are some ways you can pay your dues to work towards that promotion? So the first thing is, be an outstanding employee. And don't laugh too hard at that. I'm not kissing up to anybody, and I'm not trying to be a teacher's pet. But your reputation in your center, in your state, in your industry is golden. And that's what's going to propel you to success. So I know when I sat in a dispatch center with the headset on, I thought I knew how to do everything better. And, I was a decent employee, and I was a trainer, and I enjoyed all that stuff. But, when I looked at managers and supervisors, there was times I was like, well, I wouldn't do it that way. And then when you become one, you realize it's not quite that easy. But by being an outstanding employee and having that reputation, that's going to really help you for more opportunities. The other thing is, the big job hump to break into is being a supervisor. So becoming a CTO or a trainer for your organization a newer employee is kind of easy to do. You just have to be really good and be committed to training. But when you're a trainer, you're actually a supervisor for a single employee. So you start to build that supervisor skill set, and you also are building your skills within the agency of working with people collaboratively, which is a big part of being a good supervisor. The other thing is, even as a line dispatcher, you can participate in projects and committees. And I feel like there's lots of opportunities. I know when I was managing a 911 center, I never had enough time to do all the things I wanted to. So when folks would step up and try to help, that would not only help me, but I would see them grow in those roles and I'd view them different. And that's a big important part about moving up in your organization, being viewed differently. Asked to attend conferences and training. The first time I asked my agency, my original agency, they declined to send me, and they really didn't send folks back then. So what did I do? Of course, I went and paid my own way and went to the conference. And the next year, our agency sent 3 people: a supervisor, a manager, and a dispatcher. And I was a dispatcher they sent, so I felt like I got a lot of good payback from that opportunity. Seek out mentors, seek out coaches, seek out people to see what's made them successful, what's made them, enjoy their careers, have longevity in their careers, and also be prepared to lead up. There's always opportunities to lead up. And when you do, that's always a great look within your organization. So those are some ways to pay your dues until you get to that next level. So there is some basic career paths as you move up from a dispatcher. And, again, there's more than this, but just to cover a few, we have management. So there's different layers of management. Could be a supervisor, could be a director. You could end up being a state 911 coordinator or a consultant. Those are all career paths you can aspire to. In technology, there's radio technicians, and those folks really know their stuff. And it's such an important discipline within public safety communication. The CAD system, GIS management, that's a big piece today. GIS has really become integral with 911. So having the best files and being able to display an accurate location is really important. General IT support. There's also opportunities to work for vendors such as Motorola or Harris or some of the CAD companies out there. They sometimes look for people with that PSAP experience that can translate to the customer better how their systems work and how they would be benefited by making those purchases. And lastly, there is some opportunities as consultant in different sectors along technology. From a training career standpoint, and this was what I was passionate about, but you start as an on-the-job trainer, and then maybe you're an SME for a project or an RFP that goes out. Then an agency instructor, and maybe a training coordinator, and then as a professional trainer. So there's lots of opportunities here. And again, a lot of companies will hire people with a training background because a lot of the CAD systems and things like EMD, emergency medical dispatch, there's a component which has a lot of training to it. So I know some folks that have gone into that and have become successful trainers for the corporate side of things. So those are just a few ideas on that. Now, we talk about getting your foot in the door. And again, I'm going above that. I don't want to just put my foot in the door. I want it to be a doorbuster like it's Black Friday. I want to be waiting in line at 3 a.m. in the morning. And I want to be the right one at that door and be able to get in there. So when we think about how can you supercharge your career right now if you're trying to move up the ladder, the first thing is pay your own way. Just like I did when there was opportunities I wanted and I didn't have the resources from my agency or the approval to do those things, and I felt that they would be important to me. Pay your own way and be proud about it, and know that someday you're going to look back and that investment's really going to have paid off for you. So the next area is becoming active, like in your local state chapters of APCO and NENA. And it just doesn't mean running for president. I mean, sometimes you look at these things like, I don't have the experience to be an APCO president for my chapter. Becoming active could be joining committees. Conference committee could be educational committee. Some states have TERT, and they have committees for that, for tactical dispatching. There's lots of ways to become active. And when you become active and start networking and learning how the organization works, there's opportunities to become directors at large, or a secretary or a treasurer, and then maybe you have an opportunity to be able to become president of APCO. in Virginia. I was two-time president of the chapter and a life member for the state. That work, and I worked with APCO and ENA chapters the entirety of my career in all the states that I lived and worked in. And those relationships are amazing, and that networking and the skills you build in those roles are so important. Presenting at conferences. I always encourage people that I see as talented to present at their conferences, present at their state conference. And then I go to their session, and after they're done, I'm like, that was fantastic. Now you got to put in for national. So, I mean, those should be your professional goals. And like was said on the earlier class, you can put in, you can ask to be sent to a national conference, and you may or may not get approved. But if you get selected to speak at a national conference and represent your agency, chances are they will probably send you, because that is quite a feather in their cap at that point. Another area which is really helpful is to volunteer. So when we talk about how to prepare your skill sets for certain jobs, for example, think about a 911 director's position. One of the elements of 911 directors has to be budget and finance. So that's a challenge sometimes, because as a dispatcher or a supervisor or someone that has moved up over time, you may not have a opportunity to build those skills in the workplace. So some ways to do that, maybe there is a CAD project or a 911 phone project in the workplace and you can contribute to, and there's a financial component to that. But better yet, volunteer to be the treasurer for your local fire rescue squad or your local church. When it comes down to an interview, you're going to get asked certain questions, and generally you're going to get scored, whether numerically or just, whether or not you met that criteria for those questions. And I would much rather, if asked the question, what's your background with budget, answering, well, I don't have budgeting in terms of an agency, but I did volunteer with my local rescue squad for 3 years as the treasurer and helped with fundraising and helped, purchase equipment. Then say, I just don't have that experience, because that's, that zero score of that question may hurt you in that interview. So whatever you can do, be looking at the skills you need and be looking at how to get those skills, even if you can't get them in the workplace. Also, be a coach and a mentor. It's one of the most fulfilling things about this career, and it's going to keep you sharp. And I will tell you from experience, there's been several job interviews I've been on where I am looking to get a job, and on the panel are people that I coached and mentored. So there's not a better, hopefully not a better resource in an interview for someone to say, yeah, that person helped me become a professional. So, you never know when you're going to see folks again that you've worked with and helped along the way. Certifications, too many to list here, but that's something that really can propel you. I know I got my ENP in 2005 and kept it since, and that is a hard test, but it's a self-directed process. And even though there's study groups, if you can get your ENP, then you really know something about the gamut of public safety communications. The last thing I have here is on a college degree. I'll be honest, proud, not proud of it. I never finished my college degree. I was able to have an amazing career in PSAP management, and there's nothing stopping you from doing it. Are those skill sets that are looked for today and in job descriptions that are valued? Yes, but it doesn't mean that if you haven't compensated in other areas, like your certifications and making sure you have those skill sets, that you can't be a competitive force in that process for that job. So if you can commit to the college degree and get it, and get it in a way that's going to, is going to benefit you, please go for that. But if you feel like it's a stretch too far for whatever your situation is, don't let that hold you back from trying and moving forward and making something of yourself in this career, because there's lots of opportunities for people who are motivated and passionate to move forward in 911. So I talked a little bit about career planning. And, in a nutshell, take a look at your current situation, what your ultimate goal is, what's that long-term goal that you have, come up with some short-term goals, and then build an action plan. Yes, it's real simple, but how often do we do this? One way to look at an action plan, for example, if you're going to speak at a national conference, you have to create a list of actions. So when is the call for papers open and closed? And I have to come up with a title and a description of the class and the objectives for that. And then I got to start working on the PowerPoint. And you can build an action plan for these things. And some people are super organized and this comes easy. Me, not so much. Probably an area I'm weaker in. So putting this on paper or writing it down or doing it in a way I could follow it help keep me on the course, and it could help you as you're trying to enhance your career portfolio. One of the things that's really helped me in my career is looking at job postings. So if you want to be a 911 director, you can go out online right now and find a dozen job descriptions for 911. So what do? You look at those descriptions, look at the type of agencies, look at the experience and education that's required, salary and benefits. How do all those things line up with your skill set? Where are the gaps? So if you want to be a 911 director someday, you should be looking at those job descriptions and seeing, where don't I meet the criteria now, and what kind of steps can I take to close that gap? And really looking at job postings is a great way to reverse engineer career steps that will enhance your options and your chances for being successful in that endeavor. One thing I think is really important is going for the gold. And so when you find the job that you really want, that you're in love with, like, this is for me, you're not going to be the only one that thinks that way. And there's probably going to be competition for it. So what are some things that you can do to help prepare? So the first thing is research. Every 911 director's position I've put in for, I have ended up with a binder about this thick before I have my interview. So what do? You go on their website. Do they have an agency? Does the agency have a board where they have meetings, minutes? Does that locality post their budget information online? Do they have an annual report? Does a 911 center have an annual report? What's the turnover for that 911 center? These are all things that you can research and be prepared so that when you sit down in that interview, you have an idea of some of the challenges that organization is having. And through the conversation of the interview, you can match that up with your skill sets and things that you can, thought about ahead of time. How would you improve that? If you're applying for an organization that has significant, turnover rate or vacancy rate, not that a lot of 911 centers don't have that, in your mind, coming up with what would you do in the first 30, 60, 90 days to help address that, that would be an amazing answer to one of the questions that could come up in the interview. And it also will show the people interviewing you that you've really done the research on their organization and taken the time to really know what you're talking about before you sit down for an interview. Personalize it. Be looking at, especially with a cover letter. Now, my resume has pretty much stayed the same over time. But the cover letter, as you do your research, you might see an issue like maybe they have that locality is planning to have a big radio project, and you just happen to have some skill sets where you've worked on RFPs for that or have experience in public safety or radio P25 projects and things like that. What a fantastic opportunity to include some of that information in your cover letter, that part of your background includes working on a project for P25 radio system, and that you have procurement experience. You can customize the information you're sending before you even get an interview to help make that agency aware of your skill sets that might match up with some of their needs. Preparing for the interview, you should have a good idea of what questions would come up in an interview, and we're actually going to cover some of those shortly. But you should be preparing for those interview questions and the questions that you'll ask of the committee well before you sit down for that interview, or in today's world, get online and have your interview. Sell yourself. Now, don't sell yourself in a narcissistic way or that you're a know-it-all. I have been on hundreds and hundreds and maybe even thousands. I'm not sure, I've never added them up, but many, many hundreds of public safety communication interviews as a manager or supervisor. And, when people start talking about themselves and all the things they can do in a very unteam-like fashion, you kind of just want to die in that moment, because it's hard to listen to sometimes. So you want to sell yourself. You want to be answering the questions correctly. You want to be making sure you tie them back into your skill set, but always showing your good communication skills and your teamwork and your willingness and passion for what you do. And those things really help sell yourself in an interview. For follow up, um, I always try to send an email right after the interview, to at a minimum, to the HR folk that set it up, thanking the committee for their time and expressing my interest in the position. Back before email and all that was as prevalent, there were some jobs I actually, as I left the interview, I was dropping some little thank you cards in the mail to the people on the committee just to thank them for their time. And I don't know if they really held a factor, because a lot of times maybe the decision was made right after that interview, but I think it's classy. Again, I don't send thank you notes anymore through the mail, but I certainly always follow up with at least the HR person and maybe the head interview panel person if it's appropriate and you have their information, just to thank them for their time. It means a lot, because when you're trying to get hired, I mean, the organization is looking for what's good for them. They're looking for somebody that's going to meet the needs they have, that's going to be a good fit, and that's super important to try to show what a professional you are in that short interview window. So I want to talk a little bit about interview questions, because I think this is important, and I don't always see information out here about this. So the first question you may run into, and this one doesn't get asked a lot in public safety communication, but it's important to prep for, is to tell us about yourself. Tell us about yourself. It's a very generic, hey, you can tell me whatever you want. Now, what you need to be concerned with, your response should be, 45-second little bio about yourself, very stuck on the professional plane. Your hobbies and the type of beverages you like to drink when you go out, that's something that you don't want to share and the interviewers don't want to hear. Also, there are questions and interviewers can't ask, but certainly can be volunteered. So be thinking about those things, like your marital status or any medical issues you may have. As an interviewer, I can't ask you those questions, but if I say, tell me about yourself, and you just say a bunch of stuff, it's out there. So have in your mind a short elevator speech on telling us about yourself in a way that ties into your skill set, into the job, but is short and brief and is a springboard for the rest of the interview questions. Another one is, what motivated you to apply? And this is going to be a personalized answer. Obviously, if you say, I saw how much the job paid and I want to make more money, or I've been working midnights for a long time and now I want a day job. Those may be some motivations you have, but try to think of motivations that tie into your suitability as a candidate and why an employer would want to hire you. This is where you can really talk about your passion and why you coming into this role, the benefits that you have, and that's so important to express in the interview. Another question which almost always comes up in an interview is, what are your strengths and weaknesses? And from my vantage point, this is a question that you really need to pay attention to. So everybody's good at talking about their strengths, and hopefully, again, you'll tie them into the job and tie them into your suitability as a candidate. But on the weakness side, you have to be a little careful here. The first rule is you can't just say, I don't have any weaknesses. Because when I interview people and I ask this question, I say, I can't really think of any weaknesses I have. Part of me in my head, the interview has ended, because either this person is delusional or they're lying. And that's just not a great answer. Now, on the other hand, when you answer a question that shows something really bad, like, hey, I can never wake up in the morning, or I like to go out and drink a lot at night, and no, you want to keep it to something that is related to work and is not like a fatal flaw. Being honest about myself, organization is probably a weak point for myself. And so I would answer that question a way where I said, sometimes I get excited about projects and I'm working on things and I don't always follow up. And sometimes the organizational piece is missing. And how I compensate for that is either one, try to slow down and make a list for myself and try to put a process in there, or two, if I'm working on a big project, I may take some of those items that I am less good at and assign people that their skill set matches better to kind of track some of those things. So you can answer a question like that where you're being honest about what your weakness is, but also showing how you take how you've tried to improve in that area, or you're working to compensate for it with your team. So keep that in mind when you have those kind of questions asked of you in an interview. Another one is problem solving questions that are really looking at a process. When I was hiring dispatchers in one of my jobs, one of the questions I would ask is, we would ask is, okay, so you're working one night and there's a police call that comes in for a burglary in progress. There's an unknown medical call, and someone reports that there's smoke that they see. Which one would you dispatch first? So we weren't looking for the correct answer, though some people might think there was a correct answer. We're really looking for a couple things. We're looking for the process that the person lays out. Maybe they say, well, you know, the burglary in progress, that's time sensitive. I want to get that out, but we have an unknown medical problem. So I'm going to send the medical out first because that could be something pretty serious. I'm going to dispatch the burglary in progress next. And then last, the smoke outside could be something, could be steam. It's winter time. I'm going to send that one out last. At the end of the day, probably could, if you're working with a team in your dispatch center, you probably send a lot of those out at simultaneously. But asking that question, asking process questions, not only gets us a viewpoint of how the person can quickly answer under a little bit of stress, at least from interview stress standpoint, how they navigate that question, and also how they communicate it. So we're getting a view of their communication skills and their problem solving skills, which is really important for supervisory and management roles within a 911 center. Another one is a behavior-based question. And this is more aligned with an example of, tell me a time you had a disagreement with a supervisor or coworker. Now, again, I've had people literally say, I've never had a disagreement with my supervisor or a coworker. And to be honest with you, it's really hard to move past that, because I think everybody has had a problem with a coworker or supervisor. At least I have. And if you haven't, please mention in the chat how you've never had that problem anytime with a supervisor or coworker. I just haven't seen a lot of practical cases where that's true. But another way to not answer that is I interviewed somebody once, and they talked about they had a disagreement with a coworker and got into a fist fight in the parking lot over it. So while I appreciated the person really sharing, that actual behavior-based question answer, in some ways it was less qualifying than other candidates that we were looking at that day. You may get asked a question, what makes you the most qualified candidate? Sometimes that comes at the beginning, sometimes it comes at the end. This is, again, your opportunity to tie your skill set into what you know about the organization, and to show how that you would do a great job and be motivated and be passionate about serving the community and being on the team of telecommunicators you want to join. So be prepared for that question when you go into an interview. The last one is, what questions do you have? And this one's super important because I feel like this is where you can really make an impression on the interview panel. I know certainly I really weigh the questions I'm asked when I'm considering a candidate, because it shows me a lot of things. The first thing is, I never ask questions on what's the next step in the process, how much does a job pay, what hours, I have a vacation scheduled for 2 weeks from now. Can I still take that if you hire me? Those might be questions you have. They can be directed to the HR representative as you go through the process. You want to ask questions relevant to the job, and specifically, you want to ask questions that engage the panelists. Being able to ask, if there's a supervisor, 911 supervisor, and you're applying for a supervisor position, to say, hey, Sally, in your role in a supervisor, what are two of the biggest hurdles you had when you moved up in a supervisor? Or what are some challenges that you see in the workplace today as a supervisor? you get your panel to talk and answer those questions, it does a couple things. One, it really makes them more invested and engaged in that interview by having a speaking role and being able to talk about their experience. Two, it shows that you're interested in their experiences related to the position. And third, it allows you to then springboard back and say, well, yeah, that's great. I think that makes a lot of sense. And in this other job I had, I've done some of those things, or yeah, that would be my priority if I got this position. It gives you a lot of opportunity to interact with the panel and do so in a meaningful way other than kind of asking, questions like, when am I going to hear next about this interview? So really prep for those questions. You should try to come up with at least two or three ahead of time. That really helps when it comes to sticking the interview and having the best opportunity at getting that position. So again, you got to look at it both ways. You're answering questions in an interview. What are they looking for? They're looking for your education and training and experience, your background and job history, your communication skills. How well can you talk through and navigate this process with them? Do you have a positive attitude? Is that manifested through the interview? And I think that's really important. And are you a good fit for the position? Sometimes maybe you're not the best fit or the job's not for you. I would rather find that out by not getting the job than getting the job and really being unhappy or making other people unhappy because it's just not going to work out. So be really thinking about what they're looking for from you as you prepare for that interview or for the material that you send in to get an interview. Here's some examples of skills and expertise. I list some of these on my resume. Looking at the folks in this class, some of you I know, all of you have a lot of these different skill sets. We always think of ourselves as just a dispatcher, and you guys do so much more than that. Even getting up to a director, there's so much more than just dispatcher, so much more than just 911. You're really an important element for your community. But take a hard look at your actual skill set and be able to talk about those skills and leverage them in an interview or on your application or on your resume or cover letter to really sell yourself and not sell yourself short, because many of you invested time and effort into becoming subject matter experts in these areas. We'll talk a little bit about social media. Not going to get a whole lot into it, but I want to talk in terms of career development. First thing is, don't have pictures like this on your social media, because even way back when, we would look at people's social media when we were hiring them. That's not even counting having like an investigator for a police agency that may want to look at a detailed view. Now, not only do you don't want to post these pictures, you don't want to be these folks at the conferences you go to, in the hospitality events or the entertainment night. So, please definitely try to keep your image and reputation online as high as possible. That also includes, pictures with firearms and such like that, or pictures with not only drinking, but any kind of other substances or anything that you wouldn't want somebody to bring up and show in an interview. Keep that stuff offline. And I know myself, I really don't have a public presence on most social media. I am on LinkedIn, and I've been on LinkedIn a long time. And LinkedIn is a great opportunity to really promote yourself professionally. Steve just threw a comment, say, just a dispatcher. Who says that? Can't tell you how many times I heard that in my career. Maybe people don't say it as much now, but there's a lot of people, it still sticks with them because they heard it so much. And again, we are so much more than just a dispatcher, but we also have to prove that to the world. We have to show our skill set and our passion to set ourselves apart from that stereotype. So definitely want your public image to look like this and not something like that. So try to keep that in mind. Please don't set yourself up for that type of failure. So a few things to talk about before we wrap up. The world of public safety communication is rapidly changing. That has been a constant throughout every career, but in public safety communication, it's really changing a lot now. There is a convergence of people and technology, especially along the lines of AI. In Virginia, city of Arlington, is all their non-emergency calls are answered by Amazon AI right now. And we just see that trend going to be moving forward. I think like most of you being here, being part of this event, you're probably savvy with online interactions and looking for training opportunities, but because you're here. So keep doing that and improving your skill set. You need to develop goals and strategies to make your dreams come true. It's not just going to happen for you. You have to sit down and chart it out. And it doesn't mean it can't change over time, but you really have to think about it strategically. You're in charge of your own career, not your agency. Your agency's job is not to handhold you through a successful career. In fact, you're there to challenge your agency in a way that sets you apart from your coworkers, that you show what a resource and an asset you are so that you do have opportunities. That's up to you. They're not going to give you that. You do it yourself. You have to be proactive in that area. So, some other helpful hints: make a plan, follow the plan, and evaluate and change the plan as needed. I'm a big believer if you can see it and believe it, you can achieve it. I know that sounds really kitschy and aspirational, but myself, as putting myself back in 1992, where I became a 911 dispatcher, police dispatcher for my county, not really knowing much about public safety communication, not having a degree, being able to find a path where I was able to work my way up. If I could do it, you guys can do it. Many of you have done this already, and if you have, it's your responsibility, like it is mine, to share that with people, to enhance their experience and overall improve the art of public safety communication, who at the end of the day, the beneficiary of that is our communities that we serve. Learn from mentors. I learned from several people coming up in the career. I've tried to be a mentor and a coach to folks that have either sought me out or I've looked at and saw that they were ready. Not everybody in their career is ready for that nudge or ready to take on that challenge of how do I improve my career. When they are, though, they're ready. So whatever you can do to help those people, that's super important. It's a small world network. I mean, what Ricardo does with his In the Trenches is amazing. There's so many organizations out there today that tie us together. It's not just APCO and NINA, but I always go back to them because they broke ground. Those member organizations do so much for our profession on a continual basis, and go to those conferences, speak at those conferences, network, and you never know what could come out of it. There's opportunities. There's people you can learn from. It's really a great advantage to do that. Be persistent. You're not going to always succeed your first, second, or third try. I can remember when I was still a dispatcher, one of the first jobs I put in that was for training, when I was really getting passionate about that. I lived in Pennsylvania, and I put in for a job in Washington State, and it was for an agency trainer. And I remember that night I had a phone interview, and this is crazy. This is like the mid '90s. I had a phone interview, and I was like, so, like, what the heck? And I remember I sent my wife and son out. I'm like, leave. I don't want you here. And then I had notes like on the floor where I was on the phone, and if I had to think of something, could I look and see a note? And I was so excited so excited about that. And when I got the news that they had given the job to someone else, I think they told me I'd come in like third for the position. I was never so excited in my life to come in third for a job before, because I'm like, wow, if like I could just for a few years start working on this and really come close to getting that job, then the sky's the limit. And that just ignited my passion. So I tried harder and was again able to have success there. So I did hold something back, and I apologize for that. There is a seventh strategy for success that's a secret. I'm going to share that with you right now. So, but before I do, I'd like to ask you a question. If you can you hop on the chat? Tell me either what you wanted to be when you grew up, or what your parents wanted you to be when you grew up, and just throw it in the chat if you can. Okay. We have a nurse. That's cool. A comedian, Steve. I think you actually made that career goal because you're pretty funny. So, what I'd like to share with you is think about this. Who can tell me what movie this is from and what the important phrase from that movie? What's the tagline from that movie? Come on, you guys know this. Shake and Bake. I wasn't looking for Shake and Bake, Ryan, but thank you. What's another one? Yes, it's Talladega Nights is the movie. And what did Ricky Bobby say all the time? What was his mantra? It was, "You're either first or last." And his whole career in racing in the movie was, if you're not first, you're last. And that was actually drilled into him by his father, of all things, when he was little. So, the part of the movie when he shakes that off, he goes into the race, and I love the fact that the race he had no sponsor, so he made himself the sponsor and put me on the hood of the car and had the Cougar on there that he had in the movie. I want you to think about how many times we program ourselves with what our definition for success is, maybe without even thinking about it. Think about again, growing up and really wanting to do something, and that was your mantra that you wanted to do something, and that's not necessarily where you ended up. I think it's so important to remember and be mindful of that you define the parameters of your success. You can reprogram that. You can reprogram yourself. And so even myself, somebody was for many years and now one director, and I love that. Moving into working for the state, it was a different set of circumstances. And I had to shift my thinking because I was always still trying to be that director because that was my programming. And so know that as you go through your career, nothing is in stone. You don't pick something when you're younger in your career and you have to stick with it. You can make those modifications and embrace those changes. And don't look at them as a negative. Maybe you tried to do something and you just realized after several tries it wasn't going to work. What is plan B? There's no shame and no harm about doing that because at the end of the day, you define your own happiness too. So, keep in mind and be mindful of the fact that success is defined by all of you as you go on your career journey. So, lastly, I just wanted to say, a dream without a plan is just a wish, and I think that's so important to remember. So, I left some time if there's any questions from anybody. I really appreciate the opportunity to present today, and just thank you.
All right. Excellent work, my friend. Excellent work. I'm going to go over some of the notes that I wrote down as well. But I mean, you hit on so many excellent points. There is a question in here, so I want to go over this with you here really quick.
Okay.
So let me hit the start answering here so that it'll record, and then those who come back to watch it, they can go in there and see it once they click on it. So here's the question here, and it says, "What advice would you have for dispatchers starting out in maybe a small piece app who might not have many opportunities to travel?"
Um, I would say start small. Again, like I shared, my first conference I went to was the Pennsylvania APCO conference that they held in Lancaster, PA. I can't tell you the year; it was 1990 something. Um, that was just a couple hours from me. I think any of us that think we hit the lottery and go to a national APCO or national NINA or something like that, that's just probably not in the cards unless your agency really has the capability to do that. So I would say, start small and build off of it. First, go to a state conference you can travel to yourself, even if you take time off to go. Second, put in to present at that conference. In Virginia, for example, we have two big conferences: a spring conference in Williamsburg and a fall conference in Roanoke every year. And we have combined between those almost 800 attendees throughout our state, many of them frontline telecommunicators. So I would say start small, do what you can virtually. These opportunities like this class today and this whole session that you did, Ricardo, they did not exist a long time ago. And there's so many advantages from a networking or just picking up information that can help you. I would just tell that person to, you might have to sacrifice, your agency might not be able to send you. They might have other people they prioritize sending you. Don't let that hold you back from following your dreams. But I tell you what, when you go to your agency and says, "Yeah, I got picked to speak at our state conference," they're going to send you to the conference. So that's going to happen.
Excellent. I've got another question here that just popped in. Before I get to this question, I want to I just want to share something really quick. I want to echo that when I first started doing everything that I do now, one of the directors from the surrounding agencies had found out what I was doing with the podcast and stuff, and had reached out to my deputy director and told her that I should apply to go and speak at the Michigan NINA conference. That was before they were combined, and this was in Lansing. And so I did it, and I went, and just from doing it there was a person that was there that I didn't know was with National Nina, and I say this all the time when I share this story. I didn't realize there was a mothership. I I thought it was just all the states had their own chapters, whether it was Nina or APCO. I didn't realize each one of them had a mothership. So, someone had come up to me and said, "You're going to go to the national conference," and I said, "Okay, what is that? Like, what do you mean?" And then they explained, and as I was saying, to echo what you were saying, that's how it continued to build up, because then people were in the classes and they were seeing what was being said, and then other conferences were like, "We want you to come too," and it just continues and continues like that. And like you said, the agency ends up seeing that goes towards the exposure of what they're doing. The county sees it, and it's all good stuff there. So the next question here, I'll put this up, and it says, "How can more 911 professionals transition into emergency management, and what was your transition like?"
So that's a good question. It's hard to get into emergency management because one, there's a proliferation of emergency management degrees. A lot of times there's also a strong connection to the fire agencies because a lot of times the emergency management is within the fire agency. So those folks, when they leave their career, have opportunities. I actually found a very natural way to get into emergency management, which was every state has a watch center. So in Virginia, we have the Situation Awareness Unit. It's a 24-hour center that monitors phones and emails and talks on the radios. Gee, I don't know what else that sounds like. Maybe a PSAP. But every state has a watch center. So when that job came up for emergency management to manage that watch center, that was like custom made for me because I'd run PSAPs for so long and I could bring some of that PSAP mentality into the watch center, which is what I tried to do when I was there. I think though that might be a unique experience because those jobs don't always come up. Though working in the watch center is another great thing. When we hire folks for the watch center, one, many of them have 911 experience and they don't want to, maybe answer those baby not breathing calls anymore because we don't get that. And two, then there's opportunities for them to go in different areas once they get their foot in the door. So I'd say look at that watch center as an entry point for somebody with the skill sets in emergency communications.
Excellent. We got another question up in here. And so, follow-up question, and it says, "What kinds of sessions would you recommend a newer dispatcher to present?"
So I've worked with some newer dispatchers. I mean, I've harassed people that I know would be good that were more tenured to say you need to put in because you'd be good at it. But I've had some, I remember one young lady I worked with as a dispatcher. She was a dispatcher and I was director, and she was a little shy, like really, but I could tell she had the passion, right? So I kept after her, you gotta put in a class, and she's like, I don't know what to put in. I've only been here so long, and my question to her is, what are you passionate about? Because that's what you should teach, right? Because you don't just look at a menu to say what's the trending class. Maybe a professional trainer might do that who talks all the time. But when you want as a newer instructor to stand up there and talk to something that you're just so passionate about, the entire classroom knows about it. So in her case, it was officer involved shootings. Like for that was something that struck her as being something. So she put together an amazing class as a newer dispatcher on officer involved shootings and had examples and what steps dispatchers should take. And when she taught the passion of it just came through. And that again propels you to that next class. And so do something you're familiar with that you have a passion about that really translates into the engagement with the audience. And that's how you start building traction as a trainer.
Excellent. So I just want to touch on something here really quick from some of the notes that I wrote down before we wrap up here, and just some of the stuff that you were saying, about paying your dues, but also specifically having like an action plan to clarify the goals, and then going for the gold, sell yourself. Like I loved all of that. One of the things that really hit for me that made me think about my interview process with Allegan County Central Dispatch back in Michigan, in the county that I grew up in, is you talked about having information for or questions rather for those who are doing the interview. So, like for me specifically, a quick story here before we wrap up. When I went in for my interview in Allegan, I've got the deputy director as well as the county HR sitting there with me. We go through all of the stuff, and I was prepared because I wanted that job, especially because it was in the county that I grew up in and everything. And I'm sitting there, and then they get to that point, and they say, "Well, Ricardo, do you have any questions for us?" And I pulled open my coat and I pulled out a notepad full of questions. And they both looked at each other and they were just basically blown away. And they said, "We've never had anyone do that before." And I just went down the line with the questions that I had, and they were just all about it. And I ended up getting hired not just because of that, but that contributed to it. And it was awesome when I ended up going in for my promotion to promote to supervisor. I did the exact same thing, and the deputy director, who was now the director, she ended up just going, "I remember this. I remember you did this in your first interview," and it was one of the coolest things. So when people ask me about stuff like this, I always tell them have questions ready for them because it shows that you really want this, that you're really interested. You're not just going in there, and it adds to it. Not that you have to have it, but it's something that adds to it.
Yeah. Yeah, and a lot of my hiring decisions, because sometimes it's really close for a promotion. You have good people working there, and so some of those margins are very thin. So those questions, your opportunity to ask those questions and make it a meaningful engagement, you know, they're some of the best. And that's how you're ending the interview, which is the other piece of it. You're
Mhm.
ending on that note versus questions you may or may not have answered the best way.
Right, exactly. Awesome. Well, thank you, man, so very much for this. It was an honor to have you on to speak, and all of you for being here for the entire week of Dare to Be Great 5. It has been an amazing experience, an honor to be here with all of you, and we'll see what happens. We'll see what happens as things continue to go along. But we are going to jump over to Circle now, over to the community to do After the Greatness, to recap the week and today, and to do one last giveaway. And it is going to be excellent. So thank you, Rich, for being here, for your information, for all that you do for the profession, and everyone else here as well. Thank you. That's a wrap. We'll see you all sometime, or we'll over at Circle. We'll see you there.
Take care. Bye.
Have a good one.